Hey, how's it going, guys? I thought I'd show you this technique that I recently kind of stumbled across. Um, so basically, this technique allows me to change the density of a mesh based on the proximity to an object. The results I think are kind of fun. So here's how it's going to work. I'm going to start off with my cube here. I'm going to subdivide it so that it's a really high polygon mesh, right? So we got lots of polygons to play with there, right? And now, since it's based on the proximity to an object, I'm going to add an object for us to test proximity to, right? So here's a little sphere. Let's just set this back over into the corner or thereabouts, right? Okay, so I'm going to use this vertex weight proximity. So basically what this does is it will set vertex weights based on the proximity to an object. Since it's vertex weights, I'm going to need some vertex, a vertex group, right? So I'm going to come up here to the little triangle tab, make a new vertex group. I'll pop into edit mode and then just assign all the vertices. Cool, so now we got something to work with. Now in the vertex group, I'm going to pick that group. The target object here is the object that it wants to measure proximity to. So that's going to be my icosphere. And let's flip over here into weight paint mode so we can actually see what it's doing. So right now, it's not doing much. It's kind of boring. The big thing here is we got to set this distance thing to geometry. If you just do object, then it just looks at the distance between the center points, and it's really kind of boring. So another thing that can be interesting here is the whether you want to measure the distance between the vertices, edges, or faces. Sometimes the vertices can give you kind of a cool look, depending, but I'm just going to use faces here to make it nice and smooth. So here's vertices, here's faces. Also, I tend to like to use a smooth fall off type for this sort of thing. Okay, cool. So that's that. So I'm going to get out of weight paint and just flip back over to object mode. All right, so the next thing here is the Decimate modifier. And the Decimate modifier basically attempts to take a really high poly mesh and turn it into a lower poly mesh by just algorithmically collapsing different polygons. To tell you the truth, I don't know how it really works. I just know that it makes less polygons when I use it. So sometimes if I get a high mesh, or like a really high density 3D scan, I might use this to make it more reasonable for 3D printing. But the really big thing for this modifier is the ratio here. The ratio basically says how many of the polygons it's going to try and throw away. So the smaller the number here, the less polygons you'll end up with. So for instance, check it out. I'm going to do 0.05. And it takes a second on my machine. So here's 0.05. So it's reduced the polygons a little bit. But let me reduce it down to 0.01. So it's a smaller number, so we should end up with less polygons. All right. So the problem is right now, this is just acting on the entire cube, and it's reducing everything evenly. But if we use this vertex group here, that's where we get some of the magic. So I'm going to pick the group that we set up earlier. And now we can see kind of vaguely that there's an increase in density along where the sphere was intersecting, and less so on the outside, but it's kind of faint. So you can kind of exaggerate the effect by modifying this factor thing here. It's the vertex group strength. So I like to set this up to 5, or thereabouts. Yeah, it depends on the model and what you're doing. But there we go. So all these values, you can tweak and play with depending on whatever your specific circumstances are. But this is good enough for me. So I'm just going to apply these. I'm going to apply the vertex weights. I'm going to apply the decimate. And now when we look at that, we've actually got our mesh, right? And it's not bad. I don't really care for the triangle look. I like the Voronoi diagram look myself, and the tissue add-on has a really great way of doing this. So I'm going to go over here into Tools, and I'm going to hit Dual Mesh. So if we look at that, now it turns it into this kind of honeycomb looking thing, which I just like the way this looks better. It's cool. Cool. So we've got that, but it really just looks kind of like an aged cube or something. So I'm going to add the wireframe modifier here, which looks pretty cool. But one of the things that I like to do is I like to make the big areas out here where it's big and open, I like to make those thicker, and these inside areas thinner. So I can just change the thickness, and it'll change everything evenly, which is okay. I also have this relative thickness checkbox, which kind of does what I want. So I can make the outside, thicker and the inside thinner, but I don't get as much control as I'd like doing that. So I'm going to uncheck that. Bring this down to something reasonable. And then I'm going to use the vertex group that we've been using and use that to control the thickness as well, which does a pretty good job. And the reason I like this is I can control the thickness of the outside stuff, but now I can also control the thickness of the inside stuff by controlling this factor. So I can kind of set the thickness for the thinnest and the thickest. So that works. And then one last thing is I'm just going to add a subsurf modifier, just because I kind of dig the way it looks. Yeah, so that's pretty much it. That's what I wanted to show you guys. It's pretty much you add a proximity modifier, and then you decimate, and then do the dual mesh from tissue, and then wireframe, and then add subdivisions. But just as a treat, I thought I'd show you what happens if you put a light inside this thing, just because it looks cool. Alright, so let's just add a little plane to this scene here. And give us a background to work with. Alright. So let's add a light to this scene. Point light. There we go. Alright. And just set up the render real quick. So turn down the ambient light here. So now if we render this real quick, you can see we've got all these really cool shadows that come around. Yeah, and one of the fun things is like just moving the light around. Check that out. Yeah, but yeah. Anyway, that's the thing that I wanted to show you guys. I will catch you guys later.